Hello, and welcome to Encounters with Polish Literature, brought to you by the Polish Cultural Institute, New York. I'm David Goldfarb, and I'll be your host. Maybe you've seen the great film with Peter Sellers and Shirley MacLaine, Being There, directed by Hal Ashby in 1979, about a man who has been sheltered all his life until his sponsor dies, and then he's put out into a world that he knows only through television. Quite by accident, and through no intention of his own, he rises to power thanks to people around him who take his literal statements about the garden that he kept, or about television, as great philosophical insights. I remember seeing this film when it came out and feeling compelled immediately to read the novel that it was based on by an author that I knew as Jerzy Kosiński. This was well before I became interested in Polish culture or knew any Polish language. So now I know that his name, or at least the name that he went by, was Jerzy Kosiński. It's strange that English speakers also pronounce the name of the Unabomber as Kosiński, and maybe the Unabomber pronounced it that way himself, even though it's spelled in Polish, Kaczynski. Jerzy Kosiński led a glamorous life as a Polish émigré in the United States and faced a precipitous downfall, which may have led to his suicide, though he had faced even greater traumas as a Jewish child in hiding during the Second World War in Poland. His rise and fall are the subject of a new film currently in production called Rabbit Garden, directed by Agnieszka Holland. There is not a great deal of public information yet about this upcoming film, but you can consider today's discussion as a refresher if you already know the author, or a preparation for the film. And you might decide to revisit some of Kosiński's novels before the film comes out. We'll get into Kosiński's background in a moment, but first, I am delighted to welcome Irena Grudzińska back to Encounters with Polish Literature to talk about Kosiński's work. Irena Grudzińska was involved in the student movement and emigrated from her native Poland after the unrest of 1968. She resumed her studies in Italy and received her PhD from Columbia University in 1982. She taught courses in East European literature and history at several universities and was a 2018 fellow at the Guggenheim Foundation. Her books include Miłość and the Long Shadow of War, published in 2020, Golden Harvest with Jan Tomasz Gross in 2012, Czesław Miłosz and Joseph Brodsky Fellowship of Poets in 2009, and The Scar of Revolution, Tocqueville, Custine, and the Romantic Imagination, published in 1995. Her most recent book in Polish is a biography of Aleksander Weisberg-Cybulski, published by Znak in 2025. Irena, welcome back to the program.
I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, so we're talking about Jerzy Kosiński today, and maybe you can give a little introduction. Who was he? Say a few words about his glamorous and controversial life.
Yeah, we are talking about a very unusual person among all the unusual persons that you always discuss in this program. Kosiński was Jerzy Kosiński, who was born in 1933, so as to orient us where we are, and he died in 1991. He was born in Łódź in Poland, and he died in New York. And the main things that we can say about him right from the very beginning is that he was probably the most successful 20th century Polish writer as far as his success is considered in the international dimension. That is, his success was really attained in the United States, but he was known in all the reading world by his novels, especially by one of his novels. That is his first novel that he wrote, which was called The Painted Bird. And as spectacular as his success was, which we can talk about a little bit later, and which fascinates me as an émigré, as a person who came to the United States approximately at the same age that he did, and did not have a success like him. His fall was equally spectacular.
I mean, we should say his works were made into several, very popular movies, and especially Being There. He had glamorous, love affairs and associations and marriages and so forth. And one question that people ask sometimes is, well, like I remember once we had all of Kosiński's books set up at a book table at a book fair, as an example of something from Polish literature. And somebody asked me, is he really a Polish writer? I mean, he wrote all of his books in the United States, and he wrote them in English for the most part, and and that for some people that's the question. Of course, Americans called him Jerzy Kosiński, right? I mean, and he was thoroughly domesticated and yet not, I think.
Yeah, he was. He was an English language writer. From that point of view, one could say that maybe he's not a Polish writer. He did not, as far as I know, he did not. He did write in Polish. He wrote his sociological books because the first two books that he did were sociological. He was born to a Jewish family. His father was Mojżesz Lewinkov, and he was born as Jerzy Lewinkov.
Was it Joseph? I thought it was Joseph Lewinkov.
I think he was Jerzy.
I thought he changed it to Jerzy.
As I know, he was Jurek, which is not rare that the Jews, cultured Jews were calling their children, their boys, Jerzy.
It seems to be reported both ways, but perhaps as his father Mojżesz went by Mieczysław in Polish, Jerzy corresponded to Józef as a more Polish-sounding name, though Józef is a perfectly common Polish name as well.
His first 6 years of his childhood he spent in Łódź. Then the father, it says that it was the father, the family moved. His father really understood the situation. He was a very intelligent, very acute person who was following. He was a businessman. He worked in the textile business. And the mother was a housewife who, according to her son, was an educated pianist, but there's no proof of it. So this is one of the many stories that Kosiński told about his life and his family that did not find confirmation in facts. But the family left Łódź at the beginning of the war, and they lived in hiding in several places, but most of the time they spent in a village which is called Dąbrowa Rzeczycka, as opposed to Dąbrowa Tarnowska. And there basically the village was a place of hiding. I mean, nobody really was ignorant of the fact that they were Jews. But for various reasons, the whole community somehow supported them in that. The family was well-to-do. Kosiński at that time already well-to-do, and obviously they paid for the hiding, but in a way the support of the village was larger than that. Towards the end of the war, the family moved. This was already when the Russians came, and it seems that they moved out of danger because they were, at that time, the Polish partisans were exterminating Jews, and were exterminating some, of course, and especially people who, according to their conviction, collaborated with the Russian incoming authorities. So it seems that they had to escape because of that reason. They lived afterwards in Silesia, and then again in Łódź, and this is where Kosiński studied, and he graduated in sociology at the University of Łódź, and he graduated also in history. And in 1957, so when he was already 24, he came to the United States on a fellowship. And he then studied, invited by an uncle, then he had a fellowship. All of these details have been checked and against various certificates, various documents. He liked to tell a story that he left Poland basically illegally, that he had the cyankali, the poison in his pocket in case he was caught by the guards, and so on. But the truth was very different. He had an uncle in the United States, and the uncle sent him some money, and then he and made sure that he received the permit to get there. And then once he got to the United States, he got a fellowship from the Ford Foundation. He started to study at Columbia University.
Right.
He never really completed this doctorate but very soon he published two books, the books that I already mentioned, the books, sociology books, that were books about the Soviet Union, because he also studied for a year in the Soviet Union. He knew Russian very well, and he published papers in Poland about he was a very gifted, we have to say this right at the beginning, that he was a really, really gifted person and very driven and a hard worker besides everything. And so when he came here, he was a kind of an accomplished young researcher. So he published the two books about the contemporary Russia at that time and the contemporary Soviet Union. And these books were signed by a pseudonym. And this is where maybe you think about Joseph, because his pseudonym was Joseph Novak. This is published his books, because he was hiding from he had family in Poland. He didn't want to, he was hiding his identity.
Right.
But very soon, first of all, he met a very wonderful, rich older woman who had a sick millionaire husband, basically dying husband. And this is a couple, in a way, which is present in many of his books. This is a kind of a figure in his books, a younger attractive wife and a dying rich man.
This is E. and Benjamin Rand in Being There.
In Being There, yes. Right. This is one of the books that we will be talking about. He then, after a few years after her husband died, he married that attractive woman who was, I think, as far as I remember, 17 years older than he was. And that allowed him to somehow helped his real start in the United States. But really, what he did, I mean, I think he owns to himself because he immediately started to write the book, which then was published and which was called The Painted Bird. That is, he came in 1957. He published The Painted Bird in 1965.
Correct.
So, and he says that he came without English here, but I mean here because I'm talking from New York. But his father knew English, and his father was giving him lessons when they were hiding in Dąbrowa Rzeczycka, and so he was at least at that time he was getting English language lessons among other languages and topics that the father was teaching him. So he wrote this book. I have to say that reading it, it made a big impression on me. It's a book. It's a real one. I mean, it's really some. Don't you think so?
I think so, absolutely. Although, we'll say what my general view is, but say what give the plot summary for those who haven't read it, maybe.
The book is about a boy that is living through the occupation, the German occupation, in a pretty undefined territory. He's given to somebody for his safety by his parents. And that's choice of the person he was given to turns out to be bad. And he finds himself alone, a child who finds himself alone and goes from one person to another person to another person, moves from one village to another village in kind of an escape from violence and persecution.
It's kind of an anti-picaresque novel, right? I mean, instead of the adventurer like Casanova or something going from one adventure, it's like going from one negative adventure to the next where he's, tortured and beaten at every stage.
Yes, and it is truly a picaresque novel because I was kind of checking what a picaresque novel is by the definition, which is a novel in Polish. It's called Łotrzykowska, powieść Łotrzykowska. So the character is the character. So it's an episodic story. Usually in the first person, like this one is, or kind of autobiographical, of a kind of a person that is not too noble by itself. It's not completely wrong person, but not a really noble character. And this child here too is not. He's not presented as somebody who is a saint, and it is it is episodic. The character itself doesn't develop. It's not a psychological novel. There is no development. There is no story about how it's not that the child is exposed to some violence and learns something from it.
No.
We don't have that.
It's not a Bildungsroman.
No, not Bildungsroman at all. And then all of it, the fact that happen also are not really psychologically. I mean, it's not motivated by any development of characters and so on. These are kind of as if the symbolic images of episodes enclosed in themselves. It's very well written, I think. But it was controversial. It was very, very popular, but it was controversial for various reasons. The main reason was that there's something happening there which Kosiński himself describes as the erotization of the evil, of violence, erotization of violence. So every time he has a possibility, he makes this thing kind of, there's a lot of sex, for sex observed, seen by this child, or even with participation of the child in this novel. So he starts there as a kind of a 6-year-old kid, but has a very good memory for all the sexual situations that happen, and they are all violent,
right?
Or somehow linked to violence, and so. But the book is so somehow painful and so well written that it really captivated people. I mean, a very typical story is that Elie Wiesel, who was at that time at the kind of a height of his influence in the 60s, influence as a person, an opinion maker. He read this book and rejected it at the beginning, but then it seems that Kosiński convinced him that that this is a book about Holocaust, because it's unclear in the book itself. I mean, It's unclear because the child presents himself as a gypsy child, or somebody who looks like a Jew or a gypsy child. But whenever it's possible, he speaks as if he were a gypsy. So this was not, and persecuted as such, and persecuted because of his look, different look than all these blonde and blue-eyed kids and people among he lived. So it seems that Kosiński convinced Wiesel that it's a Holocaust book. And then Wiesel completely approved it and incredibly strongly supported it. So the question was that people thought it was a book about Holocaust. And if they thought this was a book about Holocaust, that all this violence had a deep meaning.
I mean, the first half of the book where he's, going from one peasant household to another, reminded me in some ways of Gombrowicz's Pornographia, in that it's almost as if they're so distant from the war that it could have happened without the war. I mean, that there's a certain amount of, local anti-Semitism, local anti-Roma sentiment that's projected upon him. That it's a depiction of a kind of, local peasant brutality, superstition, and those things that are that we know that the circumstance, at the beginning is that he's being given away to protect him from the Germans. But then, we don't see the Germans for quite a while until, like maybe halfway into the novel.
Yeah, the first half is very much, how to say it, ethnographic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, or anthropological. That is, this boy is dropped into this world that is a world of peasant imaginary. And it seems that he based all of these descriptions, he based his descriptions about the customs and the beliefs of the peasantry on a late 19th century, beginning of 20th century anthropological work of a very well-known authority in the matter of peasant culture, and ethnographer Henrik Begeleisen, who was living between 1855 and 1934, and that he used very liberally Kosiński, the works, the description of the myths, of the superstitions, and so on. So the first half is really very rich as far as description of this, I'm sure, pretty antiquated behaviors that he probably couldn't witness, not only because he was with his parents and not in direct contact with all these, all the women, the
wise woman of the forest and so forth.
Yes, but also probably it was not there. But then the second part is mostly also based on historical works. So he describes the behavior of Germans. He describes very historically the liberation, the kind of the Kalmucks coming in the vicinity and raping and murdering, and so all based on, again, not on the personal experience, but on his readings. Mm-hmm. And the boy in the book is then, at the end of the war, is then placed in an orphanage. Mm-hmm. And discovered by the parents at the end, the boy at that time is so estranged from the parents that he's not very happy about this discovery. But the issue with the book was later on is that he, in a way, promoted this book with a little bit of ambivalence as his own experience. Mm-hmm. And as an autobiographical book, while it wasn't.
Right.
I mean, it was not. So
he says he wrote 4, I think, different afterwords to the book, and the one of 1979 says this is fiction. This is, there's a difference between autobiography and fiction, and he says that there's more truth in fiction. That fiction can be more truthful because you can describe other people's experiences and so forth.
Yes, but I have, for example, here a book that was written about him. There was a series at that time. It was something like, I don't know, in the 80s, I think, a series of portraits of writers. And this is a book that written before he died, before Kosiński died, and before the scandal, in which put him down. And this part of the scandal was that the Painted Bird was not an autobiographical book. And here there is the author is thanking Kosiński for his contribution to this, for talking about his life and so on, and in a way approving this book. And the biography here writes his dates. They write exactly according to the book rather than to what really happened.
Right.
So he was oscillating always between he was writing the kind of like brochures that two actually he wrote. One to the Painted Bird, kind of making the arguments that were very fashionable at that time. You remember at that time there was very fashionable French new literature, new novel. Yeah. And the French new novel was always accompanied by the divagation of the authors about what is novel and what is life and what is this and what is that, and the modern and everything. And here he was doing the same, but his objective to do it was first of all, to kind of cover the fact that it was not truly autobiographical. And secondly, was also to be, since he was a very intelligent man, to be like the writer was supposed to be at that time. That is always ambiguous. Thinking about, and thinking about what is novel and what is he doing, and trying to impress mostly his colleagues rather than his readers with that. So this is the introduction about the Painted Bird. The book was incredibly successful. He got several awards for this book. He got, just a year later, a Best Foreign Book Prize in France. In 1967, he got a Guggenheim Fellowship for his next book. He became, on the basis of this book and also of several books that he wrote very quickly, right? After that, one after another. And in general, I think, as far as I counted, I think he wrote 8 novels altogether, maybe. And he started to teach at Princeton and at Yale. He was a member in Wesleyan College. He became a president in 1973. So really a few years after he came to the United States, he became a president of the PEN, of the International Literary Association of Writers. And he was a very good president of PEN. He introduced various ways in which the PEN defended arrested writers, for example, in other countries. Right. He was very conscious of persecution and so on. He started to collaborate with filmmakers. He wrote in 1971. He wrote this novel, Being There. This is a very interesting novel that we also should talk about. And this is actually, I have, thanks to a friend of mine who is working on Kosiński, I have all of his books here. Yeah. these are the notes of the author written for the painted bird, just kind of showing how fiction is fiction, and that maybe it's not an autobiography, but he never really said that it was not a real autobiography.
Well, there's also the question of the fiction of autobiography, right? I mean, that everything is something that is the product of the writer's pen, that has a certain narrative structure that, maybe life didn't actually have, but to make it a book, it has to make sense, right? So,
I absolutely agree, and I do not. I do not agree with these. The people who attacked him. I definitely, because he was attacked also for the fact that he had a lot of collaborators while writing this book, and while writing other books as well. He had people who would edit it, correct his English, and in some ways contribute to these books. And that fact, he was hiding it. And the hiding perhaps even was worse than the fact that he was doing it in the eyes of the people who accused him later on. Now, the fact is that everybody has editors.
Yeah.
And having editors is something completely different than writing a novel. To having the idea, or to seeing what it is. I mean, these attacks on him would not have stood by themselves if they were just one thing.
Yeah.
They accumulated the various inconsistencies, and the fact of telling tall tales, the fact of hiding things, and pretending, and doing all of this combined into this kind of a perfect storm. In 1982, the two journalists offended by him, two journalists just decided to check it all. And once they checked it all, they wrote a very damning article that was published in Village Voice, the small New York newspaper, but as it turned out, very influential.
Yes.
This was in direct response to a very unwise on the part of Kosiński article about him in the New York Times magazine. And the New York Times was at that time the god of newspapers. And the magazine, the glossy magazine, was avidly read, which is not true anymore, I don't think. And
not as much.
Not as much. And on the front page of the magazine, there was a half kind of with naked breast, so to say, Kosiński with a whip, because he was playing polo. He was at that time friend of everybody, friend of Kissinger, friend of Madeleine Albright, friend of Warren Beatty, friend of film people, but already endangered by the gossip about what happened to him during the war, that he didn't write the books himself, and that he lied about various things. But so he, in a way, wanted to show that he's on the top, and And some people decided they are going to kick him down.
Yeah.
And they did. And they did it in such a way that he truly was shunned by the establishment, as much as he was moved up, just like in the Being There, you know, that with people kind of, as if he were to say that people saw in him what they wanted to see. And the moment they stopped, everything collapsed.
Yeah, I think the biggest emphasis, the biggest evidence that that the novel is his novel, that The Painted Bird is Kosiński's novel, is ironically that on a certain level, it is structurally a socialist realist novel. I mean, that of course, it's not a pro-communist novel, in that sense. But if you think about what Katerina Clark says in the Soviet novel History as Ritual, I mean, she describes the classic story of the Soviet novel as being the novel of the passage from spontaneity to consciousness, of being like a peasant who's educated by the professional revolutionaries, and then by the end realize, aha, I'm a proletarian, and the novel does start where he's out in the forest, he's exposed to all this superstition, he truly believes it, he's then taken in by the church, and he truly believes that, right? I mean, he's saying all these prayers because he wants to accumulate the number of indulgences that might relieve himself of these terrible tortures that he's facing with these peasants, which nobody could have actually faced, right? I mean, that's obviously it's fiction, because nobody could, be hung, from straps every day for, many months, and then, while being threatened by a cruel dog, and then later be thrown into a cesspool and, a latrine and all that. And then at the end, he meets, the Red Army and Gavrila, who, teaches him about, that, religion is false, and that you can, that people, make their own destinies, and that you can do this. And it's odd, because why would he write a socialist realist novel when he's already in the United States? He doesn't have to please the censor or anything like that. And the book was still censored, even though, I don't know. I mean, I think that no American ghostwriter could write that story.
Yeah, I agree that no American, but I don't think that he really says that that it ends with him still believing in Gavrila and in this, that there's not this. This is not a logical progression, because in the socialist realism, there's a logical progression from one step to the other. Yeah. But you are right that at each episode, he believes in what is happening in a way, or he wants to join in some way, but it doesn't add up. No. I think, but this is a secondary. It's an interesting observation. It a little bit contradicts the first thing that we were talking about, that this is a picaresque novel.
It's a little of both, I think it's there are all these things going on in it, and you can read it in all kinds of interesting ways. Yeah. I mean, I thought that it was that, as an argument against it, if I may, please, would be that I saw a similarity with this novel, with this Being There, which many people may know, because there was a movie that got some awards and so on, with Peter Sellers as the main character. Here, the protagonist, I thought about this Being There as a kind of a mirror image in white of the black of The Painted Bird. This is a novel. Yeah. If people don't remember, about something that in Polish was called Nikodem Dyzma, that is somebody, an empty person, a sinning man, A man from nowhere.
A man from nowhere, yes. Yeah. Promoted socially, just without doing anything to earn it, not even knowing about it, and not even aspiring to it. And so it is also episodic. This guy is a gardener. The main protagonist is a gardener who, kind of an adult child, basically, with the child's mind, and knowing reality only through television, and knowing it like an émigré in a way, learning it from television, and learning it only superficially.
Well, that's interesting.
Learning what people do, how they, how they eat, what one says when somebody says hello to you, what should you respond, and so on. So seeing it, and being promoted almost to vice presidency of the United States at the end, because everybody who met him was seeing him in the way that was convenient to oneself rather than to him.
He's the perfect political candidate in the end because he has no background, so he can't be, impeached. He can't. Nobody can say anything about him because nobody knows anything about him.
Yeah, and also because he never says anything. He's almost like the boy that is from a certain moment becomes mute. This person also, what he says has no meaning, basically. It's as if he is like a child and kind of almost like a mute child.
Yeah, so I think the key description, as Kosiński writes, is when one was addressed and viewed by others, one was safe. Whatever one did would then be interpreted by the others in the same way that one interpreted what they did. They could never know more about one than one knew about them. So it's this kind of complete circle of projection and knowledge.
The only problem is that this Chauncey Gardner, the character, he didn't think anything about anybody.
No. And
he's somebody who is just in an empty kind of a vessel, because he just says yes to everything, and the only relationship that he has is with TV sets.
Right. So, unlike, there were, in that Village Voice article, they were claiming that being there was plagiarized from Doanga Mostovich's novel, The Career of Nicodemus Disma, which we discuss in season 3, episode 1 with Megan Thomas and Eva Malachowska-Pasek, who were the translators of the English version a couple of years ago. And but Disma is more of an operator, I think. Yeah. I mean, he has intention, whereas Chance the gardener is a completely blank slate. I mean, Disma wants to move up. I mean, he doesn't necessarily deserve it or understand it. And there are a lot of one question, Eva Malachowska-Pasek said that, she thought that there were certain passages that were plagiarized. She points to a certain scene where I forget if it's if it's Chance and Eve or Eve, one of them holds their hand in a certain way, and there's a passage just like that in Nicodemus Disma, but then there are some that are more like an homage, like the whole sequence with Nicodemus Disma is that a train stops quickly and a courier drops an invitation to a very fancy reception, and Disma, picks it up and tries to return it, and then they say, "Oh, of course you're invited," and that's how he gets invited into high society. And here, there's a moment where after he's living in the home of somebody who's just called the old man, working as the gardener his whole life. And then the old man dies, and he has these lawyers who are, organizing his estate, and the lawyer gives him a card, and he drops that card as he's, walking up the steps. And that's a kind of imitation of, the card doesn't serve the same function in the plot as the invitation in Disma, but I think it's like a little wink or a little homage to Mostovich, that's like where he launches,
But it is a very common plot in literature of a person taken for somebody else.
Sure.
The prince that is taken for pauper, and pauper that is taken for prince. There is a lot of, the accusation of really taking this from Doringa Mostovich, it seems to me it's really mean. It was all mean, simply, because even if he did take this as a kind of an idea, this is everybody's idea. This is in many novels idea, and he did a book that was really an original and his book. I feel that it wouldn't have been an accusation, real, serious accusation, if it weren't the combination of these various facts. One of the facts was very important, that at the beginning of his stay in the United States, he denied being Jewish, which is also a very interesting thing from that point of view, that he was in hiding. He was in hiding. He was in hiding in Poland. He was in hiding during Second World War, and it took him some time before he came out of this hiding. Very many people that after the Second World War, who changed their names during the war, who kind of incorporated these people that they were supposed to be, many people never came out of that hiding. It's not...
Yeah, this is true.
You cannot really just say that it was just a lie. It was some kind of common to a certain degree. I don't know that there are any numbers that are, but I myself know a lot of people who did not acknowledge their Jewishness after the war out of fear, or out of learned behavior, or out of, I don't want to psychologize about it, but anyhow. So this is one thing that is interesting about him. Another thing that is interesting about this is that he said, many people quoted him, and that he always said that he's always in hiding, that telling tall tales is part of it. Mm-hmm. It is part of just building some kind of linking to people you are talking to by improvising your life. Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to tell them exactly what happened, but on the other hand, you have a need of somehow documenting oneself, or justifying oneself, or presenting oneself, being somebody, being there. Yeah. So, mm-hmm. So this is also part of the same phenomenon. And I think that even his suicide is like, we were talking about Tadeusz Borowski.
Right.
Yeah. We were talking about Borowski's was a different situation because he was not Jewish, but he was very much linked to some Jewish friends and also a Jewish wife, or love.
Fiance, I think, yeah.
Fiance, yes. And but many people, and this is a kind of like almost a cliche, many people like Primo Levi, like Jean Améry, these were people who survived the Holocaust, but did not survive it finally. That is, who took their own life. And perhaps Kosiński can be also linked to this group, because he was very much, judging by this, how he described how violent his original writing was. It was not later on. It was not of to that degree. We can think that he really came out of it, even though his critics said, "Oh, he had an easy life with his parents in Dąbrowa," that he really came out of it half dead, so to say, or on his way to death, unless it's very difficult to talk about the reasons of somebody's suicide, but that is one of the possible reasons.
So on that note, let me ask you, you've got your, what's next? You've got your Cybulski book out finally in Poland?
The book is out. The book is out. The book is, I've seen it. I don't have it yet, but it is already in the publishing house in Znak. It has been taken by friends for me and photographed. So I see that it, and actually called me and showed me the book, and it looks like a real book.
Okay.
And I'm thinking now about, I'm talking, this is this week, actually it happened. And I'm talking to various places about the promotion and the kind of meeting, about the book. And I'm translating it into English, and I'm halfway through.
Okay, very good. Well, I look forward to reading it, probably first in Polish, and then seeing it when it comes out in English translation. So thanks again so much for joining us on the program. I mean, an hour is not enough to discuss Kosiński, but we made a little bit of a dent, I think.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wait up. Please subscribe and click the bell to stay on top of the program. Watch the credits for some recommendations about how you can support aid for Ukraine and for Ukrainians fleeing the war in their country. I'd like to thank all the people who helped make this series possible. The Polish Cultural Institute New York sponsors our program. Bartek Remisko, head of Humanities and Literature at the Polish Cultural Institute New York, is our executive producer. Natalia Iudin is my fellow producer and editor. Our opening and closing music is by Radek Przedpełski. Thank you all for listening and reading along with us. Let's meet again in a month, when we'll be discussing the work of one of the pioneers of Polish reportage, Hanna Kral, who recently turned 90 years of age. See you then.
To szary dzień, jak zawsze w tej okolicy. Cała sceneria dodaje się chwytlanej fotografią z ilustrowanej gazety. Tak szare, tak płaskie są domy, ludzie i pojazdy.